All right, so welcome back. And I've been cleaning out the garage a lot lately, just going through a lot of stuff that I've accumulated. Okay, hoarding. But anyways, and I remember I bought this case, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago. And this comes from a time where computer cases were just amazing. Companies just gave you so much customization options, very innovative. And this was the case of my dreams if I could afford it back when I was building computers in the early 2000s. But of course, because a premium in price of what these cost, I had to go with the beige, the cheaper ones. But years later, I still think this is a great case. And I kind of regret that case manufacturers kind of went away from this. And I get it, money, things that are obsolete, but there's still some designs that they need to bring back, in just my opinion. So let's take a look and let's dive into this Lian Li PC60. This is the B version because it's black, and it is the Plus. Now, when this case was released in the early 2000s, it was so different. I mean, it got away from the whole conventional heavy-duty steel cases. It was well built and well desirable, but the price was about $125 base range up to $250, just depending on the different features that you got with it. And I remember when this case came out, a lot of people were just boasting about how the whole all aluminum chassis would just be perfect for cooling and dissipation the heat. Although yes, a great concept, that wasn't really the focus, as we all know that for aluminum to properly dissipate any type of heat, it has to be attached to the surface. But what these cases did offer was better airflow compared to traditional cases of that time. And when these cases came out, there was a lot of features that were just added that made building in a PC so much more convenient. It was more airflow, more room for cable management, a lot of convenience. And then when you bought the case, it came with all the features that you needed. Now, Lian Li has had cases that have come out since then, just even being modern. But some of the cases that I've had experiences with, you had to buy special adapters or buy the plugs for the USB Type-C and other type of stuff like that. But this case had it all. And then they had this wonderful catalog that you could just take a look at, and if you wanted to add customization features to it or add things to improve the aesthetic or even the performance of the case, you can order it on their catalog. It was very well thought out and a fantastic case. Now, as time has progressed, there's a lot of things that we don't have anymore, such as DVD drives, floppy drives, and all that type of stuff. So obviously the front had to have a revamp, getting rid of that and actually allowing case manufacturers to really take advantage of just adding more airflow or aesthetics to the case. And when companies did something like this, unique out of the box, and created their own flair of things, obviously other companies wanted to copy, and they would make their own cheaper knockoff versions of it. So yes, you can get a case that looked very similar to this, but still didn't have the build quality. I mean, look at the Lian Li O11 Dynamic and how many companies have just really taken that and made their own flair and their own copy of it. But this stuff was the foundation, and there are a lot of things from these older cases that they've gotten rid of, they've added, things that they've changed. So let's throw this on the bench and let's take a look at it. Now, with this case being aluminum, it's obviously very light, but just like any other computer case, once you start adding components in it, that's really makes the weight on it. So now this is the 60B. It's the Plus version. I'll talk about some of those features with it. And this is just going based upon the information that I've gotten on the internet. And obviously, it didn't come initially with this panel. This was a feature that you would buy extra for it or pay extra to have with the case when you bought it. And that was the cool thing about Lian Li. And Corsair kind of did it with their cases where you could have, I think it was the 4000D, where you can have the mesh, the glass, and you can actually buy those panels from their website. But Lian Li had a whole catalog, so if you had the cheaper one without the acrylic, you could actually add this. And then there was even a version where there was like a little mini fish tank type deal with it. So let's slide this open. Really lightweight, and obviously the acrylic, oh wait, no, that comes off clean. This thing has held up very well. Windows XP Pro 64-bit. You know, I was looking for an activation key for XP the other day. I've had one the whole time. Well, I eventually did find one, but would have been quicker just to look at this. Now, one thing about this panel, it had ventilation right over here, and there's a piece that I have, and I'll show you, but this will allow you to get in fresh air for your graphics card. Now, I bought this case several years ago, and it had a Core 2 Duo quad system in it, and I've obviously gotten rid of it since then. But I'm definitely holding on to this case. There are people that love these cases. They are sought after. I'm not sure what they're going for on eBay, but I have seen these things sell for a couple of $100, just depending on the condition and all that type of stuff. And this one I will say is in very good condition. Now this, I think, yep, a caddy, so you can add a 2.5 inch, Lee and Lee approved. Now in the front, provisions for 4 drive bays, 3 for the smaller ones, and this one actually has a USB 2.0 for SD card reader and the floppy drive, which is pretty cool. On the bottom, there's actually a little flip panel piece. Mine broke off. I still have it, and I gotta find some way to kind of put it on. But on the bottom, 2 USB, audio in, speaker, and I believe that was FireWire. And another thing that you didn't commonly see was this whole panel right up here front was all aluminum. So now the knockoff versions, they typically had plastic, but then the rest of the case was aluminum. But the fact that they did this all aluminum, really nice, very clean looking, they definitely paid attention to details. One thing I did enjoy about this case, I never personally owned one, but I did build in this case for a lot of different people, was that typically with the cases, you had these plastic tabs that you had to kind of pop off. And if you pop them off way too many times or too hard, they would break. This is screwed in. You got 2 Phillips on this side. And after moving those screws, it was very simple. It's just right over here on the bottom, just push. And this thing came off nice and simple. All aluminum. I like the sound. Now this popped out, so let's just pop you back in. There we go. Little dirty, not too bad. And even the face covers were aluminum. This is where, I mean, the details, and I get why these things did cost a lot of money, because I mean, there's a lot of little details like this put into it, just not cheaping out on just putting aluminum for the body and then all this plastic, but even this was aluminum. Now, one thing I thought that was pretty cool in their catalog, they had the aluminum bezels. So they had an adapter that you could pop in over here, slide your DVD drive in back a little more, and then you would have aluminum bezel for your DVD drive. Looked really cool, matched the aesthetic. The same thing, they had aluminum bezels for the floppy drive, aluminum thermometers or thermometers or whatever they call them, the ones that told you the temperatures right over here. So very nice and very cool that they just kind of, you know, thought of all that. So if you bought this, you could run it as is stock and just keep the look, or if you just wanted to go for that more custom all aluminum feature, just get on their website and buy it. Now, before we dive into this and talk about some of the cool features that they had, this was something that I think today's cases should still have, and I know some of the high-end premium ones, they do consider that, but one thing that I thought was fantastic and made building in this more convenient in the sense that typically when we build a computer, we want to test it before we put it all together. But what you were able to do was remove the motherboard tray. And that's something that most case manufacturers have gone away from. I think it's something that should have stayed, because you can build your computer on the motherboard tray, test everything right over there, and then troubleshoot if you're running into an issue. Now we typically use the motherboard box, but I still think it was pretty cool that if everything worked and tested out properly, you could just slide it in and be good to go. So removing the 4 screws, this slides out just like so. And there you have it. Now I had provisions for ATX, MATX, all that type of stuff, and even the full-size one. 80 millimeter in the back, which kind of small, and I guess that was sort of the standard back then because it has an 80 millimeter on the top, 120 millimeter on the front. But obviously, if this was a little bigger, it would have been nicer to have 120 millimeter. But considering, you know, the time back then, I think it was pretty great. All aluminum, good quality, a nice tray right over here that slides in and out. So once you built your computer, it was tested and everything was working, go ahead, slide your motherboard in, and it was really easy. And you were good to go. And then it was time to plug everything in and add in your power supply. Now, another feature that case manufacturers have kept, and this was the only time I ever saw it with these cases. I'm not sure if there was another company back then that did it, but you'd had the bracket for the power supply, which I kind of liked. And I get why they did it, because it's a solid channel right over here and you really could not slide the power supply in easy from there. It was doable, but you would bolt up the power supply to this just like so, slide it in, And what I thought was great about these cases is that it had a ledge for the power supply to sit on. So you just didn't have it dangling. I mean, yes, not a big issue, but the support, the little details like that, that's really what made the difference on this case. Now let's take a look at this back panel. Really not much going on back here, but still, let's look at everything. And just the way things slide off, like most cases from these type of vintage, all these things were just bent. They don't sit properly. Now, these cases, they can bend, and some people had concerns with it being type of flimsy, but I mean, in my opinion, when Lian Li built this, I believe the quality was there. Obviously, not a ton of room for cable management. I mean, maybe you could tuck a couple of wires right over here, but I mean, you were limited. While I'm here, I'm gonna go ahead and remove this 120 millimeter fan because, well, it's junk and it don't work. And this slides out just like so. And these were the fans that you had back then, Thermaltake. I used to buy these fans all the time because, you know, you had, depending on the color, get them in blue, red, green, all that type of stuff. And I believe, just looking at this, don't quote me 100%, it probably had an ecosystem, so you could put one of those thermal meters up here and just monitor fan speed and temperatures and all that type of stuff. But pretty cool. So now let's go ahead and put all this stuff back together and let's dive into the inside and talk more about that. So now moving on to the interior. Obviously, if we're going to build our computer like I talked about, it's so much easier just to slide this thing out, put our motherboard in here, and then just go ahead and start hooking everything up. But the details in here is what I thought was really cool and made building in this case so convenient. So number one, protection. Now, we've all had this. You've had a case with sharp edges that wasn't machined properly, and typically some of those cases, my personal ones, I would actually take a grinder and smooth it out, obviously before putting the electronics in there. But anyways, but in this case, you'd have these plastic pieces that just went all the way around. Same thing right over here for the drives, and it would keep you from cutting your finger. You know, you're in there trying to do some cable management and pull it out, and wow, they got a nice cut, blood all over your system. Now you have a red system. And this is the stuff that a lot of manufacturers don't really think about. Now, obviously, some of them have actually done better with the machining and smooth the edges, but I mean, just the details. Now, another cool feature, very simple, very easy to remove your drive cage. So our drive cage comes out just like so, and then we can slide in our drives. Very simple, very easy, just like so. I think what provisions for 1, maybe 2, 3, 4. Yeah, about 4. Slide them in this way. Once you have all your drives good, ready to go, there's a tab right over here, and as you can see right down there, slides right in. And now you have plenty of room for all those songs that you downloaded on Napster back then. That's right, I said it. And what was really cool is you have the 120 millimeter fan, so if you actually put in a decent one, you can actually get some decent airflow, help cool off your drives, because some of those, especially like those Raptors drives, they got really hot. And then the other thing, if you had a little RGB, you get a little, you know, flare, a little bling coming out from the front. Now our traditional pinout, just like so, our speaker, yes, the little classic speakers. And I think that was pretty much about it. Now, some manufacturers, which used to drive me crazy, was that they would have the pins for the USB, and they were all individual, and you had to figure it out, and it was ridiculous. I think I saw it mostly on the cheaper ones. I'm not sure if I saw it on the more reputable brands. And if you pin that out incorrectly, yeah, you could short your USB. Definitely not a good day. Now going back to the drive cage, obviously if we were to do a modern build or modern-ish build, just depending on what we're trying to put in there, this could come out, and that's actually going to give us a lot more room to put in a bigger graphics card. So we'd be able to clear right over here. So, you know, like future-proofing, I would guess. And one thing that was pretty cool was this bracket. Now you could buy this separately. I'm not sure if it came with this case, but this bracket would mount up just like so. And now we have more airflow for a graphics card, which that was pretty awesome. And we have this adapter. So if we wanted to put like an SSD in here, yep. I don't think this is Lian Li now that I think about it. It might be. but we could pop in an SSD right over here. And I'm not 100% sure what this bracket was. Let me know in the comments. It came with the PC. I think it was sitting right over here. I might have to pull the old video because that was like 2-3 years ago. But you do have this bracket. It does mount somewhere. Just not sure where, but pretty cool. And then, like I said, on their catalog, you could just, and like I said, if you got on their catalog, you were able to order all types of pieces just to add, you know, flair and just improvements for your cases. But what I kind of liked about it is that if you enjoyed this Lian Li ecosystem, you can actually buy this stuff that actually matched it. And it was optional. It wasn't one of those things that you only had to buy that stuff from Lian Li. Obviously, you could buy it from different brands, but if you were really big on just, you know, being all Lian Li decked out, that was an option. Now, if there's one thing I will say, they definitely don't make them like they used to. And I get it. As technology changes, obviously, you got to change as well and just improve on things. But there are certain things that they just could have kept that would have just made the quality a lot better. And a perfect example is not having the drive cages in the front. I get it. Nobody really uses them anymore. So yes, let's take advantage of that, put more ventilations in the front, allow better airflow. But why keep it as plastic and not just keep it as aluminum like this? As you saw, 2 screws on both sides, it slides out, slides in really easy. A lot of case manufacturers now, and even Lian Li, they have all plastic in the front. And then when you pull that plastic off, the clips tend to break, they bend, they get loose. So why not go back to this style? Why? Because, well, obviously it costs more money and it eats the profits. But this was just great that it was just so simple to do this. And a perfect example is even in my Be Quiet case. I've pulled the front plastic off a couple of times, one time too hard in the wrong direction, and well, now one of my clips is broken and it's a little loose. But if I had screws and aluminum, something like this, which I think would look a lot better and be better quality, wouldn't have that issue. But then again, when something breaks, if you can't fix it, it forces you to buy a new one or another one. In this case, it's gonna last. And if you strip the screws, get a thread chaser, you're good to go. But I will say, this is probably one of the best cases during that time. Holds up really well, very durable, fantastic. And yeah, I really enjoy it. But like I said, they don't make them like they used to be. So what are my plans for this case? This is one that I'm definitely not gonna get rid of. I will keep this for a very long time. I've had it for, like I said, 2 or 3 years already. And what I plan to do is actually put a build in it. I thought about going with a modernish build, and I would actually love to put my personal modern computer in here, but there's a lot of logistics I gotta work out as far as, you know, fans and cooling, but that's for future me's problem. But I do have a build that I do want to put in here for a company that's no longer in business, was a fantastic company, and they're definitely long forgotten. So if you know what that company is, definitely put it in the comments. So with all that being said, comment down below, let me know your thoughts, concerns, criticisms. What are your opinions on modern day cases? Do you think Lian Li has gotten better with their new cases compared to their older styles, as far as quality, construction, and practicality? And what other case back from the early 2000s do you think is a fantastic case that you may hold on to or still use to this day? If you like this video, definitely hit the like button, subscribe if you're not, and as always, we'll see what we come up with next.